You're listening to The Secret to My Success, an interview-style podcast that asks our guests what trait, skill, or characteristic they possess that's made them a success. Hosted by Shelby Skurhawk.
I've got a little bit of a health scare right now that I'm going through. I've got a medical procedure coming up, a biopsy for some suspicious calcifications or tissue. And I try to make myself think positive about the outcome, thinking, I'm sure it's nothing. I mean, 80% of these turn out benign, but then my realist, more pragmatic side thinks, okay, well, yes, but you can't ignore the sheer math that if 80% are benign, then that means 20% are malignant. So if I try to make myself think positively, only positively, I really instinctively veer back towards negative as kind of a way of balancing myself out. So my guest today, psychotherapist Lindsey Mitchell, has an interesting take on this. She says, stop trying to make yourself think positive. I mean, your body, your mind knows that you're lying to yourself. So instead, she says, embrace the power of neutral thinking. Mitchell is the founder of Houston-based Pave Group and a sports psychologist. She works with achievers, not just athletes, to perform their best at high-stress times. So on this episode of The Secret to My Success, Lindsey and I talk about the power of neutral thinking, how to balance the positive with the negative thoughts that are going on in your mind, and how we can all use this skill to be our own best friend. Lindsey, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So you and I have talked before on another podcast, and you've got kind of a different take on what many of us would be familiar with as the power of positive thinking. You talk about the power of neutral thinking. Explain that.
Sure. Yeah. So, we've all heard that power of positive thinking, fake it till you make it, just keep telling yourself that you're the best. And that can be really difficult. Just negative thinking is a little bit easier. We kind of, beat ourselves up. So that's kind of how the power of positive thinking got started is, it's the opposite of negative thinking. So we know don't be negative. So we just flipped over to, okay, we got to be positive. And that can be, like I said, really challenging when life is difficult. And so the neutral thinking, it's shifting to a cognitive process of fact-based. So positive thinking and negative thinking are emotional, and neutral thinking is really a cause and effect. So what is my day? What do I have in front of me? How am I actually feeling? So it's almost just a really honest conversation with yourself. And it allows you to not have to be positive when maybe life is kind of gotcha. You're at that moment that you're like, man, I keep telling myself that I'm okay, but I'm not sure that I'm okay. So it's a way to really get people to start being honest with where they're at in life, where they're at for that day. Maybe, hey, I've got a huge game and I fought with my spouse last night. I didn't get a lot of sleep. I didn't work out great this week. Okay, what do I have in front of me with where I'm at really honestly in this day? How do I perform with kind of what's inside of me?
And so this neutral thinking, does it normally happen kind of in advance of situations that you're gearing up for, or is it more of a reflective process?
I think it can be both. So I think it's great to kind of have that plan ahead. This is my day. This is what I've got to accomplish. These are the facts that I know to be. But I think where it can be really powerful is when we kind of do that, self-talk. So in the moment, we have to be really aware and increase our awareness of what it is that we are telling ourselves. So sometimes we don't even know that we're being negative, or we don't know that we're being positive. So when we start to recognize in the moment what we're telling ourselves, stop and say, how can I make this neutral thinking? How can I take the emotions out of this and get to the concrete facts of this thought process? So that can be in the moment. So you could be giving a presentation and have that message of, oh my God, I hope I don't screw this up. And you take that big breath and say, I'm prepared. I know my stuff. This is a good audience for me. Take a breath and kind of move forward. So it can also be in the moment, as well as reflective after. So let's say that you didn't perform very well. You can say, what were some of the messages that I was telling myself? And were they positive? Were they negative? Were they neutral? And if they were, maybe negative or positive that didn't feel like they resonated with you, go ahead and say, how could I have made that neutral? So that you start to train your brain to think in that fact-based kind of neutral thinking way. So it can be before, during, and after, and then you start to really make those start to be your automatic thoughts instead of negative or even instead of positive.
Well, you make an important distinction between thinking based on emotion versus thinking based on fact. And positive and negative are both emotions. And so when you are taking a reflective look back at something, I use myself as an example. Whenever I have not had a great writing day or working day, it's, I've been spotty. I feel like I haven't really been very productive. Why'd you let yourself get so distracted? And why did you, now it's the end of the day and you've got a ton of stuff to do and you should have gotten all this stuff done earlier.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things are, they might be facts, but they are still emotionally based, I guess, statements. So the way to neutralize it, you're saying, would be maybe looking more at, okay, well, let's just see what I did do today. Let's look at my checked off to-do list and, well, no, I did this and I did that. Is that the type of, I guess, fact finding that you need to do?
Yeah, I think, and it's such a good point. We go into that beat ourselves up mode, all the time. It's just kind of how we're kind of wired. So I think from a neutral standpoint, if you take that example that you just used, so you could go back and say, okay, this is what I did do. This is what I wanted to do. And this is maybe why it didn't happen. So, okay, I was spotty with my productivity. Instead of, I can't believe you did that. What was I thinking? Or instead of saying, well, but I did do this other stuff and I, kind of pep talking yourself, you find that middle balance of, I definitely could have been more productive. I'm happy that I accomplished A, B, and C. Why wasn't I able to accomplish D, E, and F? And what do I need to do tomorrow to make sure that I don't repeat that mistake? So it's kind of acknowledging that parts of the day went well. So that's a little positive thinking. Acknowledging that, you can acknowledge, I'm disappointed in myself that I didn't get more done. So you're very factually kind of saying, I can be a better version of myself tomorrow. But instead of spending a lot of time, beating yourself up, those words that you tell yourself, can be very powerful. And you don't want to destroy yourself or build yourself down, but you just say, hey, look, I let myself sleep in, probably can't do that. I took a phone call from, a friend to help that person out. I'm glad that I was able to do that today, but I need to make sure that I don't do that tomorrow because I need to be productive because I have a little bit more to accomplish. So it's just very honest. Right. So it doesn't necessarily have to be overly positive or overly negative, very concrete kind of thinking.
Yeah, well, and I can see how that relates to the sports performance or the psychology part of it, because then it's taking a look at the facts of maybe I didn't get enough sleep, maybe my diet wasn't great, and so I didn't have that good energy to be able to kind of push through the day. So I guess evaluating some of the more concrete factors of your body, I guess.
Performance, exactly. So for an example, also looking at what you can control and what you can't control. So a lot of times we beat ourselves up for things that, we don't have control over. So it's like, man, the crowd noise was really loud and I wasn't able to hear, what my teammate was telling me. That's very factual and true. So instead of, I can't believe I missed that shot, you say, I think the crowd noise had something to do with that. I can't control that. However, I know that I need to work on controlling my focus in loud situations. So now when I go practice, I'm going to recreate loud noises. I'm going to work with my teammate on how we can communicate even when we can't hear each other. So you're taking something that you can't control and using it to make yourself better next time. So instead of focusing on, blaming the crowd, or instead of beating yourself up because you didn't perform well, you're taking the facts of that situation, analyzing it, and then going back to the drawing board on making sure that that doesn't happen again. So you're spending time reflecting that's going to make you more productive next time.
It occurs to me that a lot of this thing, I mean, you said that, it can be for athletes and non-athletes, but I'm curious if there have been instances where you have yourself applied this, and did your interest in sports psychology start perhaps as a student athlete?
Absolutely. It's always funny. You kind of lend towards the things that, interest you. And for me, there are times when I talk to clients, I'm like, man, I should really utilize some of these tools for myself. Like, right. What am I doing? Not taking my own advice. I tell people, set your intentions for the day, be really intentional. And, I wake up, 10 minutes late and throw myself together and, get through my day. But absolutely. So as a student athlete, I had a lot of challenges. I am 5'3". In college, I was over 200 pounds. I've since lost about 120 pounds and just kind of made a lot of lifestyle changes. But I was a softball pitcher. I am not the ideal body type for a softball pitcher. So I had to kind of overcome a lot of adversity. And I really did take on a lot of negative messages. Beating myself up was what I did on a daily basis. And it does impact your performance because you really start to tell yourself negative things without even knowing it. And then you swing, because right around that time, 10 years ago, is when positive thinking became, kind of the trend. And I couldn't get there because I'm like, I am just faced with a lot of stuff right now, and I'm trying to fake it till I make it, and it is inauthentic. And so I think you perform at your very best when you're very authentic. So even if all the pieces aren't there yet, I'm honest. I know what my challenges are. I know when I'm going to struggle. I know, what I'm doing well, what I'm not doing well. And that faking it thing, I think, is when we really hamper our performance because it's not honest. And it's amazing when you start having honest conversations with yourself that you can rise above, a lot of negativity, a lot of adversity, a lot of challenges because you're being really honest with yourself and you've now become your best friend. And you're like, man, I don't need this person to tell me the facts because I have been able to tell myself that. And when you start to have that power over the messages that you're telling yourself, it's such an amazing, flip to switch, because the things that we tell ourselves are so much more important than what other people are telling us. And so when you have to be honest though, because we know when we're lying to ourselves. If I was like, man, I'm an amazing softball pitcher, I'm going to strike all these girls out, like I'm unstoppable, I'm like, not true. But when I was able to take a step back, I said, I don't pitch the ball very fast because I'm short. So what do I need to do? I have to be really specific with my locations. I have to move the ball around. I have to know what the batters are bringing to the table so that I can work around them. So instead of focusing on telling myself that I was amazing when I wasn't able, I don't have that skill set. What skill sets do I have, and how can I use what I've got to make me, a collegiate athlete? And I was doing that and not really realizing that I was doing that, but my performance got better.
You're absolutely right about thinking negatively and not even realizing it. Something you said earlier, that oftentimes negative thinking is just easier to do. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think one, having an honest conversation. Our world is negative. A lot of people, there's a lot of negative stuff in the news. There's just a lot of things, going on in our society. So I think negative messages are surrounding us. And so I think some of that has something to do with it. But it is really easy to beat yourself up. Everybody does that. Oh man, I'm not good enough. I didn't work hard enough. We can always be better. So instead of saying, I should have woke up earlier, I should have ran, I should have exercised, why did I, eat that? It's so easy to fall into that trap because you say it and then you keep kind of beating yourself up and you're not challenging yourself in any way to make any improvements. You're just focusing on this negative stuff, and it's trendy right now. It's trendy to beat yourself up. And so when you fall into that, I think it can be judgmental, kind of irrational, fear-based kind of things. And the problem with that is what we think will impact how we feel, which inevitably will impact how we act. So kind of rising above the norm is very difficult. And that's kind of that neutral thinking is not, a lot of people don't apply it. So it's hard to do something that not everybody is doing. I mean, man, I think when we get together with our friends and we're griping about all kinds of different things, you can feel it. You start to feed into that and you start to, oh, you're right, that did happen. And I can't believe so-and-so said that. And you're right, our boss does suck. And man, I wish we had more vacation days. And it's so easy. I mean, I think we've all been there. Like, man, that was a negative conversation that I didn't even realize was negative.
Right. That is such a downer. That's such a drain when you end up in one of those conversations. And yeah, I know a lot of us have had those.
Yeah, I mean, you walk away and you're like, that was supposed to be like happy hour, and I'm certainly not happy. Like, what was that about? And I think, and it's easy, and then you feed off of that. So I think the more that you can be your own friend and kind of get into that neutral thinking, and then you start to say things, out loud that start to become more neutral, and then your energy, and then you become the person that feels good and people want to be around, and then people don't fall into negative thinking around you because you don't allow that to like get into you. And so then you get that more confidence, you're behaving in a neutral way, your actions or more neutral thinking, and you'll see a difference, kind of in your performance when you start to do that. And then your automatic thoughts are neutral. But it's an easy concept, but if you're not aware of what you're telling yourself to begin with, it's hard to make this change. So I always tell people, for 1 week, just track some of the things that you're telling yourself, and you'll be surprised, man, that was really negative. Or when you leave dinner, go back and say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how negative was that? On a scale of 1 to 10, how positive was that? So spend a week, tracking the messages that you're telling yourself, and then pick 1 or 2 of them and really say, how could I make this neutral? How can I make this non-negative? I'm not grading myself. I'm not judging myself. It's very objective and concrete. It can be a little challenging when you really try to write it out. And then you start to do that over and over again, then your automatic thoughts are more neutral, and you'll see, an increase in performance.
So that rawness and that ability to be able to ask yourself, okay, what am I feeling? Speaking of trendy things, then you hear about mindfulness. Is that essentially mindfulness?
Absolutely. And mindfulness, I tell people all the time, as trendy as, awareness, mindset, mindfulness, mental toughness. I mean, people throw these words around a lot. I'm certainly guilty of doing that. But a lot of it is, again, being your own expert in the sense of, what does it mean to you? And that's kind of back to that authentic kind of talk with yourself. So when you think mindfulness, what does that mean? So for me, it's being very present and honest with myself. I know what's happening positively. I know what's happening negatively. I'm very intentional about my action steps for the day. I think that's truly mindfulness for me. For other people, it's meditation, being in touch with their body, being very present, listening. People can decide what mindfulness means for them. I think the most important thing is you can't do it wrong. Yes. So anytime you're trying to be more mindful, no matter what that looks like, don't grade yourself. Don't just challenge yourself to be very present with other people, with yourself, and really grounded in your space. That is truly mindfulness, and you can get there any way, that you want to.
Right. Well, and it's not a pretty image quote on Instagram. Like, it's, positive vibes only. Like, it doesn't have to be like that.
Right. Or it's, it's not the t-shirt that, says that, kind of thing as well. It's being present. And I think for me, One of the powerful things about therapy, like I would love to say it's because I'm brilliant, but it's not that. It's that you get a chance to be with someone for 50 minutes that's in a room that has no distractions, no phones, no music, no TV, and you are truly present with that person, and it gets to be about them, which never happens. And so that truly is kind of embodying mindfulness. So I try to do that when I'm not in therapist mode, and just being with people and being very present and really not just hearing them, but listening is such a gift that you can give someone. And then you can also do that for yourself. Take time to say, what is my body telling me? What is my mind telling me? What are these people that I'm associating with telling me? Do I need to make changes? Do I need to do something different? So really just almost feel like you're very present and in tune. Not saying you can't have cell phones and music and TV and things like that, but 5 minutes where I'm going to give myself the time to check in with myself to see where I'm at. Because you don't know what you need to change if you don't know where you're at.
Right.
And it changes every day. So some days, man, I feel like I'm a rock star. I'm like, gosh, I was great today. And then tomorrow, it's like, I'm not sure what changed, but I am not great today. So I need to figure it out. So, we're always improving and changing. But there are some days that I'm definitely more negative, and I have to make a very active effort to be neutral. And then there are some days that I'm very positive. So if you feel yourself in a positive energy, lean into it and ride that roller coaster of positivity, because it's great. But it's when you're not maybe at your finest, the neutral thinking is what can help you be great, even though you've got some other stuff going on. So to have an elite performance on what you would consider maybe a bad day is really where you separate yourself from the pack of, elite thinking, doers, performers, and things like that. So that's really kind of where this brainchild of neutral thinking came to be, is if I'm not at my best and I still have a game and I'm still trying to win the World Series, I better figure it out. Because the Houston Astros, I'm going to use that as an example. The Houston Astros aren't going to wait for me to have a good day. The game is today. I'm pitching today. I got to figure out, what I've got in my toolbox, because, it's game time.
Well, and I like what you've said about those kind of ups and downs. I mean, I'm convinced that everybody is just afraid to admit that they have those bad days and good days, that everyone wants to turn clouds into rainbows and make things kind of, I guess, a whitewashed appearance of everything's fine, that back to the positive vibes only. But playing off of that, so one tip that I've learned is, so when you're having those positive feelings, and like you said, kind of you should lean into it and kind of ride the wave. One thing I've done just as a practical sense for social media and for Twitter is I go ahead and schedule a lot of my posts, especially if I've got a new podcast, a new episode coming up, an article I've written, something I really want to help push out to my Twitter followers. I'll write those posts and schedule them when I'm, kind of on that high, when I'm feeling great, because I know that maybe tomorrow or the next day I might be right back down, and I'm not going to want to talk about those things, and I'm going to want to just go back into my shell like I do. And so
that's such a great idea, I think, and such a great tip, because you don't want to have to force yourself to be inspirational if you're like, man, not an inspirational day for me.
Right. And I didn't really put it together until our conversation today, because you're right. There has to be authenticity. So it doesn't mean posting or scheduling something that says, God, I'm a rock star, when right at that moment you're in bed eating ice cream straight from the canister. Like
Absolutely. And, social media is kind of designed. I love social media. I think it's such a powerful tool to connect people, but it's true. I think it's made us feel like we have to put a shiny coat on everything. Or it goes the other way and people's posts are super negative. So sometimes if you even think about it from, if you're trying to practice neutral thinking, Twitter and status updates are a perfect place, because you actually have to type it out. So start putting, posts that are very neutral, very fact-based, and see, what kind of traction you get on that. So, I think it's true. People always think they know what's going on in your life because you put a picture of a pumpkin patch and,
Right.
apple picking, and you're like, yes. And today like you said, I'm eating ice cream and I'm really struggling to, cut up that apple that I picked so beautifully on Saturday and posted about. So, and you're never going to have it all figured out. You're going to have those days, you're going to have those moments. And I think you're right. Owning that, I think, one, can be very powerful because you're authentic with yourself. But I also think, what we kind of don't value is it does connect everyone. So when we're just really honest with ourselves and we're honest with other people, then they feel like they can be honest back. Okay, now we're figuring stuff out. Now we're both honest. We're coming from a good place. We're connecting. And not because I'm a rock star today, but because I'm able to express, what's truly going on with me in a non-emotional way. So when we present things to people as facts, then their response, if it's not amazing, I'm okay because I'm coming from a fact-based place. I'm not emotionally connecting. I'm connecting on a fact level, which is really meaningful and powerful, that will later turn into maybe something a little bit more emotional. But it's a nice way to start an honest conversation with people and connect with people on a level that people don't really do anymore.
That's the point there, that level of conversation, that authenticity, that it's hard to start a conversation if you are basing it on the highlight reel of, your friend's social, Instagram posts. Sure, you can, oh, that looks great. The kids look so cute, and what a beautiful day that was. Like, but maybe I'm just socially awkward and bad at conversation, but I don't know where to go from there.
Oh, no, you're not socially awkward. I think you're just honest. It's like, I have no idea, what else to say. And I've even done it before. My business has not been open for very long. And I always felt, when people would ask about the business, that I had to be super positive. I'm a therapist. Life's supposed to be great. And as these things are coming out of my mouth, I'm like, you liar. Like, that is not the case at all. I don't necessarily need to tell people, I cried in bed thinking, am I going to be a success? I'm not sure that's the message I want to put out. So now, I tell people, owning your own business is hard. I certainly, can get better at time management and setting boundaries. But it's great. It's been a great change. So again, that neutral kind of thinking, because when those messages were flying out of my mouth that were not authentic, I wasn't present in the conversation because it wasn't true.
You were kind of self-analyzing what had just come out of your mouth, and already then your mind is off somewhere else.
Right. And I'm like, like I said, I tell people things and I'm like, man, I should really do that myself. I'm like, I'm lying to myself and then I'm beating myself up and I was not present in that conversation. Like, therapists fail for sure.
Right.
So I think true. It's just going back at the end of the day, being honest with yourself, being honest with other people, coming from a fact-based, and realizing some days you're going to be negative and you really consciously gotta to change the track. And some days you're going to be super positive.
That is very important, Lindsey. Before I let you go, I've got just a couple of quick hit questions for you. So you ready?
I'm ready.
What's the best piece of advice that you've ever gotten?
Gosh, that's such a great question. The best piece of advice I've ever gotten is probably from my mom, who told me to absolutely own who I am at every moment, and that you don't have to be the smartest person in the room, but you have to be the most caring, person. So I kind of got that mindset of owning who you are from her. She is an amazing person that owns her space and people connect to. So she told me to own who I am.
What's the worst piece of advice have you ever received?
That I wasn't good enough, that you're not enough. And that message can really take you, because people say it, I think, to inspire you, like, that tough love kind of approach. I think it's terrible advice, because I may not be enough in this moment, but I certainly, am enough and will find a way to accomplish great things with what I've got. So I think people kind of throw that around as a tough love approach. And I'd say it's probably the worst thing that someone has said to me.
Right. What movie can you quote by heart?
Mighty Ducks.
Really?
Yes, probably 1, 2, and 3.
Oh, funny.
I haven't thought about Mighty Ducks in such a long time. It just brought me back to a very positive place.
Well, and then finally, kind of based on what we've talked about today, your own journeys and experiences, putting to work a lot of the practices and principles that you're teaching others. What would you say then is the secret to your success?
I think the secret to my success is at the very heart of it. I truly do believe in what I'm doing, and I believe in who I am. So I think I have, honestly, good days, bad days, and all of that. But I truly do believe that I care about people. I'm a good person, and I'm willing to put in the work to be a success. And I think, when I lay my head down at night, I'm very proud of what I'm doing and the people that I get to help along the way. And I always try to go back to that at the core, at the very core of who I am, what's happening. I'm proud of that. And I'll figure out how to, push myself a little bit or do things differently tomorrow. So while I acknowledge that I'm not perfect, I do believe, in where I've come from and the good and the bad and the ugly and kind of how I can stand behind that and know that I come, from a really great place. And I also surround myself with successful people and with people that truly, truly believe in me. When I find out that I don't surround myself with them anymore. And that's been a really big change for me, I would say, in the past 2 years. And I've built a support system that's very small, but very mighty. And that allows me to be reminded, hey, at the core of who you are, you're awesome. So go keep being awesome. And so when I forget that I really value myself and really believe in what I'm doing and love the work that I do, I have a little core group that reminds me of that. So I would say those two things have allowed me, to be a success and to believe that I can be, even more successful, which I think is also really important.
Lindsey, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciated our honest and authentic conversation.
Exactly. Even if we're eating ice cream in bed tomorrow morning.
That's right. And you know what? I'm going to post about it on Facebook.
Exactly. Thanks so much.
Have a good one.